problems wrong with their adrenal glands, if someone, it's like a whole bunch of different pathologies for all different types of systems in the body. They can manifest inside of the mouth. And so it's a really systems focused and wholly focused field, whereas people think that you're just drilling on teeth and replacing cavities and infected dental tissue. It's really fully encompassed on a whole bunch of different stuff. I think for a dental school, I focused more on the classes relating to the systems of the body more than the teeth classes. The teeth classes seem secondary in a lot of the ways because we have to learn such extensive knowledge about how the body works and the interactions, the biochemistry of the body. And people don't give it enough credit from the outside, but it's a very system and medically focused field, which I think is really cool. Because it's really awesome to take the anatomy class, learn about it, and then take the physiology class, and then take the molecular biology classes and the cell biology classes, and know about how it all relates to the mouth, and then knowing and reverse how the mouth affects the systems, how like little things like if someone just had a heart transplant, they shouldn't be getting a certain type of cleaning for like 6 months because the bacteria in their mouth could potentially get into their bloodstream, and then infective endocarditis could ensue. So it's like really cool stuff like that. It's a way more medically focused field than people give it credit for, and I think that's something that could either be very rewarding. For me, it was very rewarding to be able to find out and get fully enveloped in, or it can be something that people are like, oh, I just want to give people crowns and give people veneers. But it's cool nonetheless, because there's a lot of biochemistry and molecular biology behind the field that people really don't pay attention to, and a lot of chemistry, which people probably do know because you're using a whole bunch of different materials. But yeah, I really love that about the field.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I definitely didn't know that, so that was cool to hear. What would you say was one of the hardest parts of your journey so far?
I think I'd rather answer like what was hard in different stages,
Sure.
because right now I'm just going to be relating the answer to the most recent stimulus or
Mm-hmm.
the most powerful stimulus. But so if I'm going with undergraduate, one of the most difficult things was being able to, for one, balance everything, because it's like, okay, you're still majoring in something that's difficult. You still have to get all A's in your classes, but you still have to be super involved and putting good effort to make it actually useful time you're spending. And then on top of that, you're expending all this energy in undergrad. You're doing all this stuff in undergrad. And then sometimes you look amongst your peers who aren't doing anything to where they have to have another like basis of applications, and they're just chilling. I'm like, okay, well, they're like, oh, do you want to go out? And I'm like, no, I can't go out tonight because I have to volunteer in the morning on a Saturday. And like, there's a lot of sacrifice that's attributed to the process.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really tough sometimes to have to sacrifice so much in order to be able to accomplish what you need to accomplish, to do what you need to do. But at the same time, when for dental school, we all find out where we got in, or the first people know where they got in on December 1st or December 3rd. And so on December 3rd, when you got the acceptances rolling in, or like August through what, like I think February is when people stop sending invites. So August through February, when you're getting those interview invites, it makes it so much more worth it. But it is tough with the process to be able to balance everything and then realize how much you have to sacrifice in order to do what you need to do. In dental school, there's a volume issue that we encounter here with the material. Like, they give us so much material. Like on a Monday morning, a class will throw one class in a 2-hour lecture will throw you like 200 slides of information. And we're just like, okay, it's Monday. I'm not good at math, but I know this shit's going to be bad by Friday. And so just dealing with the large amounts of information and then taking a lot of classes, like we're usually taking like 11 plus classes at a time. So it's just like a lot of information coming from a lot of different directions. And then if you want to specialize, it's kind of the same thing with undergrad. You have to do so much other stuff. And so the balancing act is very difficult, especially in dental school when it's so much more intense. But it makes it so much easier when you have a very extensive Google Calendar or written calendar or whatever it is. Being very organized and very disciplined and not procrastinating is very helpful. But being able to balance a lot of this stuff is really difficult sometimes. but I guess it's going to play the same thing again when I start getting residency interviews. If that's the case, it'll be really cool. And then if I get any residency acceptances, or when I match into a residency, that's going to be well worth all of the stress that was put on me right now.
Yeah, definitely. And then kind of going into something you mentioned earlier, what techniques have you found really work for you when it comes to time management and balance?
Yeah, so one is finding we have everybody, I guess the data supports that repetition is more important than like the means of repetition when it comes to learning. So in general, a lot of people, if you are going through material, whether it's auditory or seeing it or reading it or writing it, the repetition is more important than the means, but we still have things that we prefer. In terms of learning. So it's finding the thing that you prefer most, and then out of the thing that you prefer most, trying to find the most efficient way to do it. Mm-hmm. And so like the whole work smarter, not harder thing is a huge aspect of dental school, because if you can study this PowerPoint in 30 or 45 minutes rather than taking 2 hours, it makes the world of difference. And it really depends on the individual. And this is why the experience of dental school can be so variant amongst everybody. But finding the ways that you learn really efficiently is super helpful. It does require taking some risks at some points in order to find what it actually is useful, but it's really worth it. So like in undergrad, first semester and a half, or the 3 semesters of undergrad, I was in lecture, I was writing stuff. Like writing notes when the professor was talking, and I would find myself being more focused on the words, like the individual letters, than like what the professor was trying to say. And then when I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna just stop and just listen to the professor. And then once I started doing that, not only did my comprehension go up, and my exam scores just started flying up, because I just tried something different, and it ended up working better for me, just being able to sit and then take what was going on. And it's a gamble, because if it doesn't work, you're like, damn, I gotta catch up. But when you find something that's a lot more efficient and a lot more spends a lot less energy, or makes you spend a lot less energy, it's really worth it. And so on top of finding the thing that makes it most easy for you to be efficient with studying, also just being organized is top tier, one of the most important things. I'm pretty sure everybody at my class uses Google Calendar. You have different colors for everything, and you fill the thing out for the week. And every time you have to do something, you put it down. If you have to do something multiple times a week, I have alarms set. So like I'm doing some stuff with social media now for my school, and I have to post something on like a Tuesday, and I post something on like a Wednesday and a Thursday, and I'm not going to just let myself remember that. So I just have alarms set throughout the week to help limit the amount of load that I have to remember. And so that's just like a part of organization, just having a lot of things that are there to help you stay on track. And it can seem a little militaristic at sometimes. You're like, you're gonna wake up at this time, you're gonna do this, and then you're gonna do this, but it's so much less stressful than going by the whims of not only your stress, but the whims of what's being handed to you. So being really organized and finding the most efficient way to study is really helpful. It does vary. So like for me, studying, I'll listen to the lecture, or I guess it depends on the class. If the class is more difficult or I like the class more, I'll probably listen to the lecture. But if I don't, I'll just go through the PowerPoint, and that's more efficient, and I'll still get what I need to get out of the class. But I'm just like, okay, and let me just get what I need to get out of this class. And so that's just one way to make it a little bit more bearable.
Yeah, good advice. Gail, would you like to take a couple of the questions?
Sure. So I'd say let's just like go back to undergrad. What really made you choose ASU for your undergrad studies?
So this is hilarious, because it comes down to my high school experience, and that I had a terrible GPA coming out of high school. And so I really only had two choices. I could either go to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, or I can go to Arizona. And I lived in Tennessee my last 3 years of high school. and I did not like it. And so I was like, I'm going back to the West Coast, but my grades aren't good enough to go to a Cal State or a California school. So I'm going to ASU, where they pretty much accept everybody. And it was probably one of the best educational experiences I ever made, just because how expansive the resources they have are. With 100,000 students, you have to have 100,000 students worth of resources, and they do for sure. And so I just got into ASU, and I wanted to get out of there. And so I was like, they have a lot there. They have a lot of resources. They have a lot to offer. So I'm just going to do this. And it ended up being a really good choice.
And I know you already like mentioned like some like other things of the sort, but I just wanted to like ask this question directly. What made you actually like choose a microbiome minor and microbiome major and music minor?
So I always liked the concept of things that you can't see but affect us on the highest levels. And with microbiology, specifically, what I like to do is virology. And so these are particles, these are submicroscopic particles that are affecting you, that affect people. We're in a whole pandemic because of a submicroscopic particle. And so the way these things interact with us is super interesting. And I've always liked that aspect of being able to figure out how things work on a small level. And like the molecular biology behind it is really cool. The immunology behind it is really cool. And so I did the simple decision of, I like to learn about stuff that gets people sick or stuff that affects us that we can't see. And I'm not about to do physics. So I'm going to do microbiome. And it was really cool, especially because I love immunology and I love like virology. So it was a cool major.
Yeah, definitely. I wish someone from at our organization, we have this we basically structure like medical committees, departments, and initiatives, and one of our medical committees, is actually immunology. And I was just wishing that someone from that committee would be here, since a lot of them are usually want to become immunologists or are really just passionate about the field in general. Yeah. But maybe next time.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's just go, since you are a dental student after all, let's just go back to dental school. And I guess I'll ask you, what is something that you didn't really expect going into UCLA and just dental school in general?
Yeah, that's hard, because when you're going into dental school, you're talking to dental students, like current dental students, or like expect the worst. And so you're like, okay, I'm expecting everything to be ridiculous. And so with the standards so low, it's kind of hard to answer like what surprised you. But I guess it could go in a good way. I didn't expect the learning curve to be so steep, or no, the learning curve to be not as steep. And so the first day, like the orientation week, we have our anatomy professor comes and tells us the stuff that we need to have for the class. Or that like the paperwork that we have to fill out to be in the anatomy lab and doing dissections and like that whole process, like the logistics behind it. But then he goes and he throws out your first lecture, which is learning about the back muscles. And so we were like, okay, this is going to be rough. And that weekend I spent, I think, 13 hours studying that one PowerPoint. But at the end of the same quarter, I think I got through the last PowerPoint in like 5 minutes. I timed myself. And so like the ability for us to pick up information, since you're like, the brain has a capacity to expand itself. The brain has a capacity, like long-term potentiation. You have an ability to create new neural connections, and it's all based off of how much you're trying to. And so when we're forced into a situation where we have to hope that long-term potentiation works as well as it can, it does. Like you increase your capacity to learn, and I didn't expect the capacity to learn to happen so quickly, and it did. Like, so by the end of the quarter, we were just flying through PowerPoints, and now I'm in my second year. Like halfway through my second year, we're skirting through these PowerPoints, whereas it would have taken so much longer when we were at the beginning. And so you expect to be able to get better at doing this, but I didn't expect it to happen so fast. And it's been because we were forced into the situation. But by the end of the first quarter, we were just it was a pretty good transition. I didn't expect it to be so good, but you're forced to.
And so now that you're like, zooming through those PowerPoints, maybe you can like tell us something that you've learned, because actually one of our questions from someone who is interested is, what is the coolest thing you've learned so far? So maybe you can just give us like a small fun fact about dentistry or anything.
That is hard because there's a lot of super cool stuff. This is also forcing me to like unintentionally study right now, so I got to think about.
Multiple super cool stuff is good too.
Okay, yeah, that helps a little bit. What are some cool things? I guess this is something that a lot of people seem to be interested in. It's not necessarily, it's something that's cool to me, but it's not like a what kind of thing. It's that your saliva holds a lot of contents in your body that people really didn't expect. And so we're able to communicate information a lot for like biochemically through the things that we use to like genetically do things and like find out a whole bunch of stuff. You're able to do it through your saliva. So one of the new technologies that they're developing at UCLA is called eFirm. And do y'all know what PCR is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, PCR is when you take like a sample of like that has genetic material. You take them in genetic material, they do something to it in order to make it more digestible, put it back together, then blow it up and make it into a whole bunch of different copies. And that's really good and it's really cool and it's been cutting edge technology. But it's kind of inefficient because the base pairs that it's able to work with is limited. It's like 150 base pairs you're able to work with. But the new eFirm technology, it's like 35 to 40 base pairs. So it's really sensitive to really small increments of information. And so we're able to use our drops of saliva, not only to find like antibodies that are able to like antibodies that we're able to search for when we're looking for immunity, but you're also able to find like viral loads. You're also able to find antigens. You're able to find all kinds of different stuff in your saliva. And so we're using 40 microliters of saliva in order to find the most extensive information. So there's cancer biomarkers. You can identify if someone has cancer in any part of the body. You're able to do that from the drop of saliva. You're able to find out if they have corona. They're currently developing like at-home coronavirus tests that are super sensitive. And so one of the biggest things is being able to find cancer biomarkers and things that are indicative of cancer. They're very apparent in the saliva. So we're able to find out a whole bunch of this stuff just from going through and analyzing people's saliva, which is really cool. What's something that's more interesting? This is one of the first like large things that we learned. It was like, so we have our curriculums are like system based. So we go through like the heart, the lungs, and the kidney first, and then we do like the GI system second, then we do the nervous system, and then we do like the reproductive system and endocrine system and stuff like that. So one of the coolest things that we learned first was like heart, lungs, and kidney. And it's just so interesting to learn on a daily basis how much you have to alter your treatment based off of the patient's medical history. And so whether they have like high blood pressure, whether they have any heart defects, whether they have any kidney problems, whether they have any lung problems, there's a lot of things that you have to do in order to alter your treatment. So like when you're giving someone local anesthesia, you have to be very cognizant. You have to do a bunch of calculations about how much local you're going to give someone, especially if they have like a high blood pressure or they have like hypertrophy of the heart or anything that could alter the rate at which blood is or the force that's being exerted of the blood through the body. So when we're giving local anesthesia or when we're giving certain medications, we have to be very cognizant of their medical history. So specifically with the heart, lungs, and kidney, when it comes to like people having different stages of high blood pressure, when it comes to people having different types of heart abnormalities, was like whether they have like atrial septal defect or they have tetralogy of the fellow or whether they have a whole bunch of different heart defects, you have to alter your dental treatment based off of it. And one of the other things that I find really cool is that the mouth is one of the first things that shows most pathologies of the body. And so when people have like, when people have like a herpetic infection, that shows in the body, but it even goes lower than that. When someone is immunocompromised, you see it in the mouth because they get a lot more growths of like fungal infections and stuff like that. When people are taking certain medications that suppress the immune system, it can have that same effect. When people have when people are taking, so like if you're taking certain antidepressants, it can change the movement of solids in your body, and so you're at risk for a lot more dental infections than you would be if you weren't. And then on top of that, it could increase the or change the microbiome inside of your mouth. And this is also the case with like steroids and taking like NSAIDs and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's all really interesting just to see how much from a systemic standpoint dentistry is affected, or the oral cavity is one of the most sensitive things that we're able to see as a representation of what's going on in the body.
Okay, yeah. I think I'll be handing it over to Aliza to ask a couple of questions, and then Vrinda after that.
Yeah, of course. So I guess we're already like jumping back and forth between like your time as an undergrad and dental. But is there anything you wish you could have done differently in high school or maybe even undergrad that probably would have better prepared you for, I guess, any aspect of this pathway?
For high school, there's like it's kind of a difficult balance for high school. So I'm kind of glad that I was lollygagging in high school, just because I'm doing a lot of years of school. And so it just extends that amount of like energy expenditure I have. And so when people talk about the idea of burnout, I'm just that much further away from whatever my body's capacity is for that. And because I just had 4 years where I wasn't worried about school. So high school does matter in that it helps you put yourself in a more financially good position if you're doing well in high school, because you can not only get into a school that will give you a scholarship, but maybe you can get into a school that's more competitive but has lower tuition. But scholarships is mostly important. If you're doing well, you can put yourself in a more financially advantageous position. And in addition to that, in high school, when you're putting a lot of your effort into studying, you find out a lot more information about how your brain works, how you like to study. And that makes the transition into high school a lot easier. But I think someone shouldn't stress if they're not doing well in high school, or if they want to turn around like their senior year. They're like, okay, I need to take it seriously, and they feel like they're not going to be set up as well. Like me and a whole bunch of people at ASU, like it's a whole bunch of people who in my class were just people who were just screwing around in high school, and then we're like, okay, let's take it seriously now. And so you don't have to feel like you're behind. You don't have to feel like you're behind if you don't do necessarily well. One of the things that I can say about college, it's not something I wish, but it's something that I know is really helpful, is if you can be a TA for any class, it's super helpful if you're doing any, like if you're doing med school or dental school or nursing school or whatever. It's really helpful because you're getting constant exposure and you're getting the highest level of mastery of that information that is most likely going to be on the DAT, which is the exam for dental school, or the MCAT, which is for medical school. So you're getting ridiculous amounts of repetition, high level of understanding, and broad levels of understanding for a whole bunch of different stuff. So being a TA is really helpful. And that's something I think that a lot of people should take advantage of if you can, is to be a TA or like an undergraduate TA, whatever it can be involved in like helping people with subjects. Even if you're a tutor, I was a tutor for a little bit, and that was even helpful. And so being a tutor or being a TA for your classes that are going to be on the exams that you have to take in order to be admitted, it's really helpful because you get such a high level of understanding of it, and it makes studying for those exams so much more bearable.
And I guess while we're on that topic of, I guess, like advice to students and undergrads, do you have like any advice for high school students specifically for pursuing dentistry, whether it be, I guess, like things to get involved in and like extracurriculars, anything like that?
While in high school, so for dental school applications, you can't put anything that you did before undergrad. So anything you did in high school, you can't put it on your application, or they don't even look at anything that was before college. And so in terms of things to get involved in order to set you up better, I don't necessarily know anything, but I do think people should get more exposure to the field so you're absolutely positive that you want to do it. For one, when you're transitioning into college, if you shadowed at a dentist when you're in high school, you shadowed at the surrounding specialties while you're in high school, and you know for a fact that that's what you want to do, it's even more drive for you to to trudge through those hard times when you're spending long nights studying in college, because you know very clearly what goal you have in mind, and there's not even like the slightest bit of, or there's probably going to be the slightest bit because you'll be tired, but there's not going to be those bits of like, is this even what I want to do? Because if you're able to verify that that's what you want to do very early, it'll help you build what you want to do towards that goal a lot earlier, and it's helpful in like the motivation aspect of things, knowing for sure that this is what you want to do. Yeah. And you should also shadow, if you want to do medicine, you should shadow a dentist to see if you'd like it. If you want to do dentistry, you should shadow a physician to see if you like it, and do same for podiatry, pharmacy, all kinds of stuff, optometry, stuff like that. So you know for sure what, like, that's what you want to do. Because there are a few people in my class who are like, this is a lot of work and I'm not sure if I want to do this anymore, but here I am, $200,000 in debt and second year in.
So I guess you kind of touched upon this earlier, but since we're already on this topic, I guess what made you like ultimately stand out from other applicants?
I think it was like the leadership stuff. So I was very involved in like the administrative role of stuff, and like you put the things that you were involved in on your application, but the descriptions is really where you're able to create that narrative of the magnitude of what you were doing. And so when I was able to be like the undergraduate representative of the School of Life Sciences and like the college, I was working with a lot of administration for a lot of things that were going to reflect the structure of the school. And so that was something that tied really big into the admissions committee, in terms of me being able to work with people who are higher up and communicate the needs, and being able to, it's pretty much like working at an institutional level when you're not really sure how the institution works, but being able to gain that knowledge and communicate it and being able to work with those people is really cool. And one of the things that I've had a lot of the conversations with the people is the thing I was acknowledging earlier, is that if you have a clear narrative of your strengths and a clear narrative of the things that are gonna help you be a healthcare professional, those are the things that are gonna help make your application stand out. Is when you have an application that's clear, and it not only, you don't have to focus on one thing, but you're able to describe those things clear, not only the things that it's helping you with, but how that can contributes to being a good healthcare professional, and why that's important in being a good healthcare professional. And then on top of that, you just have like the GPA and stuff. And then in addition to that, having a well-rounded application too. So I was doing the research, and then the teaching, and then the volunteering, and then having like the grades and stuff. So being able to touch those bases, not just checking off a checklist, but doing things that you like within those realms, and being able to communicate that well is really cool. And then not limiting yourself on the application, not limiting yourself to things that are like, a lot of people, what they do on the application is they're just trying to prove themselves on it, whereas they're not trying to describe themselves on it. And so for me, I talked for UCLA, their secondary application, they just asked like, what's something that you'd like us to know about? And then initially I wrote about like teaching and blah, blah, blah. And then I went to the health advisor, and she was like, I thought you were a musician. And I was like, I am. And she was like, you haven't mentioned this anywhere. And I was like, oh, that's right. And then so I changed the question from what would you like us to know about you? Or what additional information would you like us to know about you? It changed from teaching, which was like, I've done this and this and this. And I changed that to, this is just describing something I love and I'm passionate about. And that's all we talked about in my interview was music. And so stuff like that is really cool. Just being able to describe yourself and not feeling like you have to prove why you're qualified or things that you've done, but being able to describe that you're a human being and that you've had these experiences and this is how you think it's helpful for your goals. And these are things that make you you. So it's music, or whether it's dogs, or whatever it may be. Being able to make those descriptions and make yourself seem like a person on your application rather than an applicant. Like my friend, he was applying to WVU for med school, and he was like, what the heck should I write about for, it's asking about it. It was the same question as I got in my secondary, what additional information? And he was like, because he's an animal. He had like 90 somethings percentile on the MCAT. He had a 4.0. He was neuroscience and bio, and he did all this research with like the American Diabetes Association. He's doing all kinds of stuff. And then he was like, I've talked about all this. I was like, bro, talk about your dogs. You love your dogs. And then he ended up having questions about his dogs on his interview. And so they like to see it when people are making themselves more human on the things. And that's something I'd really think is important to relay to people.
Yeah, that's definitely really good advice. I think going back, you mentioned that you had done research before. Would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'll start with how to get into research.
Mhm.
So there's a couple of different ways. So there's a way that a lot of people do. It's you see, like you think of, okay, what do I want to go, like what kind of things do I want to go into, whether it's like molecular biology, whether it's like microbiology, whether it's like macrobiology, which is like animal behavior, stuff like that. Seeing what you want to go into, finding like on your faculty directory which people are in which areas. And then just emailing the professor, not saying, hey, do you have any spots in your research, but emailing them and asking to come and meet and to like discuss their research. Like, oh, I read your paper on that. I think it's very interesting, and not trying to like talk too much about it, like you know everything about it, but just being like, oh, this is really interesting, and I was wondering if we can meet and talk about it. And then they come and meet with you, and then at the end of when you're having your talk, asking if they have any spots on the research. And so that's the main way people get into research labs. But for me, it was when I was a TA and the PhD students were like, I need people to help. And I was like, me. And they're like, sweet. And so I started doing the social insect research, like I said earlier, because I do all this microbiology. And I was like, let me learn some other stuff. And so what we did was we were trying to learn about the decision making based on periods of stress for the certain type of ant called Timnothorax. And so like the different types of decisions they'd have to make were based off of how hungry they are and if it was worth the investment of their energy. And so how we were able to, it's kind of sad, how we were able to test the levels of stress is like starvation periods. So it was like 24 hours of starvation, which is nothing for an ant. They can do that easy money. Or it was like a few days of starvation, which is a little bit more difficult, and they have to start making some decisions for the colony. And so it was either like a good food, they'd have to go from their current nest to a good food source or a bad food source, or go from their current nest to a good housing or a bad housing. And like good housing is like dark with a narrow entrance. Good food is like high in sugar and stuff like that. And so we were pretty much trying to see how they made their decisions, how they transported, with what urgency did they transport based off of their situation. And so it was really cool to see that they would take different patterns based off of their starvation period and the quality of whatever resource it was. Like they would be carrying each other based off of different factors, and we were counting to see how much they carried each other, how much they were just following each other, seeing all the different nuanced behaviors that they have based off of their situation, whether it's stressful or not. And so it was really cool for one to just be able to learn how complex they are, like how complex of pretty much a civilization they are, but also to see like the personality of the ants was really interesting because they're so timid and they're so scared. Like they'd be eating at their little food source, and then one of their own colony members would come and like accidentally bump them, and they'd like back up and like look around and make sure that everything was good. And then they would go back into whatever they were doing. And so it was really cool to just be able to have a variety of biology that I was interacting with, which was really cool. And then I also did like the thesis my senior year. We had to do a thesis, and it was based off of HIV, and it was seeing how you could alter levels of infection of HIV based off of there's two different like main receptors for it called like CCR5 and CXCR4, and specifically for the CXCR4 receptor, there is a gene in like human herpes virus like 6. There's this certain gene that downregulates that certain receptor, and so I was seeing if you could if you were going to micro-inject that gene into an embryo of a rat and have the rat grow to have express that gene, if the rat was going to have less CXCR4 receptors because they have the gene that downregulated it from the virus, if they'd have lower levels of infection of HIV. And so that's the other part that I did for my thesis. But the ant part was way more cool, I think.
Yeah, and I think all of that really goes back to what you were talking about what made you stand out and the fact that you really pursued what you genuinely found interesting instead of trying to tick off a bunch of check boxes, which is, I like that. I think we're headed towards the end. There is one last question I wanted to ask, and then maybe we can open it up to everyone else. Gael, Aliza, does that sound good?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, just like since she spend her time with us here, Vrinda, if you want to ask that last question.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, my name's Vrinda, and I'm a vice president at Medicine Encompassed. And just asking more questions. I was just curious, how do you think that minoring in music impacted your journey? Because I know you were like, it helped you feel more like personable and a lot, but do you think it actually like helped in the medical sense and scientifically, you know?
I guess that all depends on like your philosophy behind like mental development. And so it was really cool to be able to have like different methods or different brain patterns of thinking that you had to do on both high and low levels. So when it comes to being able to learn and comprehend large amounts of information, that's one pathway of increasing your brain's capacity, but then also tuning into the different pathways of like musical aspects of things, and not only the music, like musical history aspects of things, and like contextualizing that into like the sociology based things that are based off of those histories of music. So it's like really two really different ideas that you could say like, oh, this is what I learned and this helped me grow as a person and this helped my brain grow this type of way. You could view it that way, or you could just view it as I was just majoring in music and it was helping me cool down when I was overextended with the aspects of like immunology or whatever. And so I really just thought it was a cool mixture, so I wasn't just bogged down on science all the time. But it also did give my brain a chance to be able to create different neural pathways and think differently than just thinking as a scientist, thinking as a historian, and thinking as a musician, and thinking as an artist and stuff is a really cool way to help your brain, especially when it comes to doing research and stuff. You can be a lot more creative and you can think a lot differently about things rather than thinking so linearly. So that was really cool. I'm sorry, I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah.
No, it works. I was just curious because I wanted to know if, because they're like really not necessarily connected things. So, and I wanted to.
Yeah, that came up a lot. That came up a pretty good amount of times in my interviews. They're like, why did you do all this music stuff? And yeah, for the UCLA, my interview, that's literally all we talked about. I was saying that my favorite artist was Erykah Badu and like her artistic things that were really inspiring to me. And we talked about Erykah Badu for my whole interview. And that was really cool.
Yeah, because I'm interested in like neuroscience and stuff. So I wanted to know if that also is like, but yeah, that was helpful. So thank you.
All right, so since we're pretty much at the end, I guess this is where we open it up to any questions. You guys are free to turn your cameras on, unmute yourselves and ask, or put it in the chat and we can read it out loud.
Oh, that's a really good question. So the school environments it's kind of hard to answer how the environments are different just because the academic structures are set up a little differently. So with ASU, we had letter grades. It was like, okay, you get an F through an A plus, and these are the grades that you were all trying to get. And whether it's graded on a curve or not, everybody was trying to strive for a certain letter grade. And then learning the information was secondary. And so with this, it's like, okay, I'm trying to get 100 on every exam, and so I'm going to be really intense about this. And because you need a grade and you need that outcome to be specific. But for UCLA, it's a lot different because for the dental school, we have pass fail. And so we're learning the information and trying to pass. And trying to pass seems secondary a lot of the times because you're just so focused on the patients that you're going to be treating in the future. So in terms of that, the environment's a lot different. And then I guess from ASU is a lot more robust in its resources. It's a lot more robust than like the people, like the amount of people or the different groups of people that are represented than UCLA, because it's just a bigger school. So obviously there's going to be a lot more people from different places and different backgrounds. And in addition, there's just like, so for ASU, a lot of people who go there are either people who really didn't try that hard in high school, or they're people who did ridiculously well in high school and they're going to, and ASU is paying them to go there. So those are like the two, they're not the only two main groups, but those are some of the two main groups of people, especially within STEM. And so you have a really intense pool of like socioeconomic differences and people interacting based off of those. Whereas at the dental school with UCLA, higher education selects for a certain amount of privilege, and then like as you progress up in a higher education, it just selects more and more for different types of privilege. And so I find a lot of my classmates are very, very privileged in that they come from very like affluent households and stuff like that. Affluence to the level I never experienced before, especially in undergrad or even in high school. So that part of the environment's different because you're with a whole bunch of people who have grown with ridiculous amounts of money, and that's a lot different in the environment. Yeah, because getting into any type of professional program is difficult, and it takes a lot of money. Just to start it takes a lot of money, and to get into the school and to get into college, you have to have certain tools, and then to like go to college, you have to know, okay, maybe I got into college, but I can't afford it. So what am I going to do? And then so it takes a certain amount of money to go through college, and then okay, I have to spend $3,000 on applications. Then you have to spend that much money. And then, I have to go on interviews. That's like $5,000. And then you have to do that. And so there's a lot of like economic barriers. And so you find a lot more privileged people here, which makes the environment a lot more different. That was a good question. I also probably could give a better answer if there were more similar experiences, because there's like undergraduate versus dental school are just different experiences in the first place.
Yeah, but definitely. I mean, at least for me as a senior, it starts like right now, really understanding all those financial barriers. I mean, I've definitely been lucky, but I know there's other people it's just so hard to imagine like getting into college and then being like, I can't afford this. Like it doesn't make any sense to me, and there's so much change that needs to happen within the educational system. So yeah. Anyone else? All right, so I guess while we're waiting for any last questions, last thing I wanted to ask is, what is the one thing that we didn't ask you, or is there anything that you would like to add that you think we should definitely know?
I was talking about like being a TA for helping with being able to have high levels of understanding and deeper understanding of material that's going to come back. Like it helps with the admission tests for dental medical school, but it also helps for your higher division classes. But you don't have to extend it to being a TA to get that. So when you're in your first like bio classes and chem classes, being super serious about those classes and learning as much from them as you can is so helpful when you have to, like, because general bio, if you're doing like a biology major, if you're doing a microbiology major, general bio has a lot of it's a bunch of different things that come up in a bunch of different higher division classes. So like general bio, say we talked about like, we did some biochemistry, we did some what's it called? Ecology. We did some cell molecular biology, and we did some we just do a whole bunch of different stuff. And so we did little segments without too much depth of a lot of different things, but you get really good baselines in those things. And so when you're extending into your higher division classes, they're not just like random classes. They're mostly taking those little concepts that you learned in your general biology classes and going very in depth to them. So having that really solid foundation is so much more helpful, not only for like being able to like have to spend less effort in that higher division class trying to learn all the information that you have, but it enables you to be able to better contextualize the information, think about it on a higher level, and understand it on a higher level, which helps you work through problems and work through the ideas that they're presenting to you a lot more well. So you don't have to just memorize stuff and spit it out on an exam. You can actually work through an exam question rather than having to be like, I'm getting this wrong because I don't remember seeing it on the slides. So having that good foundation is really helpful down the line. So taking those classes really seriously is helpful.
Yeah, that's good to hear. We had our last AMA was a pre-med, and I think one of the things she mentioned was like it's kind of hard like learning all this stuff and not being able to see immediately where it's applied, but still like knowing that down the line that foundation is very important.
Yeah. I mean, even it extends beyond like the higher division classes, stuff that I was teaching. So the stuff that I was TAing for, it was mostly like animal physiology, so like nerves and action potentials, and then so I had a really good foundation on that. And so when we got into dental school, we had a whole section of our foundations of science, basic science class that was just based off of action potentials and nerves and neurons and how all of those things work. And so since I was a TA for that class and we had to like develop exams, we had to develop curriculums, we had to teach it, we had to explain it, we had to do all of this stuff, I didn't really have to study for it when I got to dental school, and which was really nice, especially considering that any break in dental school is a good break. And so being able to have that down the line 4 years later, 3 years later, 2 years later, having those fruits, seeing those fruits be able to be plucked is really cool. And I was like, oh, I know this. And this was literally what we were learning in undergrad in a freshman bio class, kind of. It's more in depth, of course, but the foundation's there, so you really don't have to do too much tweaking.
All right, then. Aliza, Gael, Vrinda, one of you guys want to wrap it up?
Yeah, of course. So we actually have another AMA coming up soon if you guys are interested in that. It's, I think, on the 20th. Darshini, correct me if I'm wrong, but that should be the expected date for now. And we're actually having another AMA with a DO student, I think.
Yeah.
So I think that should be a pretty cool experience to supplement us getting to meet a pre-med student and a dental student. And yeah, we just want to thank you all for coming. I know this was on pretty short notice since we didn't have too much time to advertise, and I know most of us are straight out of school or still in school. So we really appreciate taking the time out of your day to come. And Gael or any of the directors, if you guys want to add anything.
I'd say that's pretty much it for today. Once again, if you just got the link via our email and didn't join our community Slack, please do so. The link to join is in our link tree, which I will also just send in here in the chat if you are not in our community Slack.
Oh, awesome. Immunology and dentistry. That's dope.
And once again, just thank you all for coming, and pretty much just like have a great rest of your day.